Hey, what's up? It's Baz the Magician, and welcome to the tutorial for how to do the ultimate think of a card trick. There's a couple of things to keep in mind during this tutorial. First, everything I said and did in the presentation is 100% accurate. I didn't change anything. I didn't do any camera cuts. This can be a borrowed deck. The spectator does shuffle them and everything else like that, and it requires no setup or math or thinking on that part. Secondly, and most important, this trick does take a few minutes to do, as you saw in the presentation. So you have to make the spectator aware that this is going to take a bit to do so they don't stand there and get bored. And I'm going to give you a couple pointers on what I do when I'm performing this trick, or how I get the spectator to look at the trick, whether I'm street performing or I'm doing a party. And one final thing, this camera is on I'm filming this on my cell phone, so if the tripod shakes or the table shakes like that, I apologize for that. I'm going to try to do the best I can. All right, so on to the tutorial. What most people don't know is that a lot of think of a card tricks are self-working, and this one is no different. That's why it requires all 52 cards here. It has to have a full deck. Secondly, why I said mine's the ultimate version is simply because most think of a card tricks will give a spectator a certain amount of cards to use, and they narrow it down through that. There may or may not be some forces in some of them, but everything you saw me do in the presentation works with this, and it's a full deck. All right, so that being said, let me get right into it. So for purposes of this tutorial, I'm going to do the trick, but I'm going to tell you the card I'm going to be using so you can follow along with what's happening. So I'm just going to say a random card like 5 of spades, for example. Now, after the deck is shuffled, the deck cannot be reshuffled once it's done. Once it's done and you start the trick, you can't reshuffle it. So let's start by dealing the cards out. The reason I had explained about the math is because there is no math involved. I just wanted to get that out because people will have a habit of saying, oh, you're doing some form of math. You're really not. The trick is self-working. So this is why I get out front, or I get in front of it saying this pile has 18 cards, this pile is 17, and this pile is 17. That's just how it works. So whatever way you start dealing, you want to make sure that you're dealing from the same way. If you start dealing this way, keep it that way. If you start dealing this way, keep it that way. That's all there is to it. Now, the reason I'm going to go through this is to show you what actually happens. So once we find the 5 of spades, I'm just going to go to the next part and deal them out again. So we're just going to go through here. And the reason that you have the spectator go through all the piles beforehand, it's not that you can't stop in the middle of it. It just gives it a better effect if they go through all of them. That's why it may be easier for you to turn around and then have them go through it all and then basically tell you, because they could find their card in the first pile. All right, so here's the 5 of spades. When they point to the pile it's in, you put the pile it's in on top of the deck. The other two don't matter. As long as the pile that it's in is on the top, you're good. And then you just re-deal this out. You deal this out 5 times like this, but on the last time you do something different with the pile. You put it on the bottom. And I'll explain what happens after that. So I'm just going to quickly go through this as you're seeing this. Now, one of the problems that this trick has, not just that fact that it takes the time to do it, is that there is dead space when you're dealing. So try to think of something to talk about. That's why I was talking inside the video. I didn't want you to sit there. You see, it's awkward. So let's look at this. So 5 of spades happened to be in this pile again. Again, it goes on top. That's the second time. The reason that you want to deal these out is sometimes spectators can't deal cards properly, or they take too time, or they're drunk, or whatever the deal is. So that's another issue here. So, yeah, this is a little bit tedious, but the effect is really good, as you saw. I'm kind of hoping that the 5 of spades winds up in a different position this time. Let's try it here. All right, it's not. So it's not in this pile anymore, so now that changes the pile, so that gets it out of the way. You literally do not have control over this. All right, it's in the second pile. So again, this is the third time we did this. As long as the pile that it's in goes on top of the top of the rest of the deck, you're fine. Now we just re-deal out again. This will be the 4th time I did this. Let's continue doing this. Oh, by the way, I have these cards on a towel here. I just don't like my cards being wrecked. Speaking of that, I gotta get a new, I gotta make a new tabletop. That table you see me use in my shows, I actually made that myself. There's a tutorial on my video. There's a video series on my channel that shows how I did that. Oh, there it is. Okay, so that's 4. That was number 3. That was number 4, sorry. And this will be number 5. If this isn't number 5 and I actually forgot, sorry, this has to be number 5. All right, so after I get these dealt out, the secret to this is a matter of knowing the position of where the card is. The card basically winds up in the same position every single time you do this trick. That's what makes this so good. It's self-working. So let's look. It's not in this pile. I already know it's not in this pile. And the reason why I know it's not in this pile is because of where the card actually positions itself. It's in this pile. So what happens is once you get the pile on the last time, the pile goes on the bottom. The card that the pile is in goes on the bottom because the card always winds up 5th position up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It always winds up on the 5th position as long as you follow that procedure that I did. So that's how you know where the card is. So when I go through, you just kind of mess around and, okay, I'm going to pull this one out and put it down. Then you say the card, they pull it out. Now, yeah, it's a bizarre trick. But anyway, that's it. So here's what I'm going to give you a couple pointers on how I actually get spectators to watch this trick. So the first thing you have to remember, if a spectator says yes and wants to watch it, that's on them to stand there. If you're hired to do a show, they can't tell you what tricks you're doing, so you can literally pull this off. You still don't want to warn them that it takes a bit to do. You know, we don't want to be getting, crack some jokes or something like, I'm not going to get, look at, he's getting white hair waiting for me. You know what I mean? It kind of breaks up the mood, so people are like, okay. So if you kind of crack jokes or you kind of do things, yeah, fine, that'll break the ice. But as far as when you're doing on the street or you're just walking around performing in a bar, you can kind of tell when you're talking to somebody whether or not they want to sit and watch something. But if you're already doing stuff and they know you're going to do something cool, 99.9% of the time when you tell them you're going to do a cool trick that takes a bit to do, they'll watch it. That's just how it works. Sometimes when I've been on the street, and I've performed this trick many, many, many times on the street, it's usually because I'm talking to them after I did the show, or there's hanging around watching. And if I catch somebody standing around watching, I'm like, hey, you want to see something really cool that I don't really show anybody because it takes a lot of time? And then I go ahead and do it. But for the most part, if you get a crowd going, you want to do something really, really, really wild, that's when you do it. Because a lot of people will be watching. And after you pull that off, you can do a couple of quick things here and there. If somebody's going to walk off, after they say yeah, let them walk off. It may feel awkward, but they said yeah, and then you're like, oh, when's the trick? Where's the trick? Oh, this is taking too long. Okay, it's taking too long. I've had that happen before, and you can see why with this. So this is a trick that's very selective, that you want to only do when you know when the time is right. You'll know it. But again, if the spectator asks you and then they walk off, don't feel like bad. It's just them. Because a lot of the people I do the shows for, some of them are drunk or, had a few too much to drink or whatever it is. So, yeah, to speed this up, what you could do is you could turn around, and once they look through, because if they pick the pile up and the card is in the first pile they pick up, there's no reason for them to look through both of them. So just turn around and say, okay, I'm going to turn around. And when I turn around, you're going to go through, and then only tell me when to turn back around, and you say, okay, what, you explain to them what, you're going to go through and you're going to find whatever pile it's in. So again, the reason why you don't want them to tell you what pile is in until you look through all 3 cards, all 3 piles, is so you can't guess even where it may or may not be. And that's why you tell them not to slow down if you're watching them. Don't even slow down or pause, because then you can have an idea of where it is. So that's basically how this trick, that's how this trick works. And that's basically the pointers I usually do when I'm doing these tricks on how to get people to watch it. I'm babbling. Anyway, this is Spaz Magician signing out. You have a good one. Take care.